Welcome back to another episode of Bulldog Blitz. Week 6 of IHSA football is officially in the books, and we'll start our show with another weekly roundup, followed by a recap of NFL Week 5, where we'll talk about some of the biggest fantasy performances. Great week for fantasy, not particularly for me. But we'll start with our weekly roundup, where we have 5 games we're going to talk about, starting with Riverside Brookfield versus Glenbard South.
Yeah, RB grabs a much-needed win this week against the high-powered Glenbard South. They win 26-21, and we showed an outrageously great offensive performance with Giancarlo Garcia really stepping up in the big lights and really powering our offense to a big win to improve to 3-3 on the season and 1-2 in conference.
Yeah, this game was completely led by Giancarlo Garcia and Xavier Ambrose de Jesus, who had some insane highlight plays. They had 361 total offensive yards, 282 passing receiving yards, and 79 rush yards. Down 9-13 at halftime, they put on a 17-yard touchdown run by Karras and an insane 18-yard head tap touchdown in the third quarter to lead them to victory.
I mean, if anyone was watching that broadcast, you could hear the excitement in my voice. I saw that ball go up literally in front of the other defenseman's face, or the cornerback's face, and it's grabbed over the head. Insane catch, probably the best catch I've seen live.
Yeah, that was probably
ever.
The best catch to ever grace Kennedy Field. I actually submitted the catch to You Got Moss, the segment on ESPN NFL. I put it on Twitter, tagged them, and I was surprised it didn't actually get nominated. And when I watched on Monday Night Football, there was actually another high school catch that got number 3 spot, and it was actually way worse than ours.
Nowhere near it.
Befuddled why that even got chosen.
But yeah, let's move on to Xavier himself. His stat line of the night: 9 receptions, 198 yards, 2 touchdowns with a long of 50 and a second longest of 22 yards per reception.
Very reminiscent of Randy Moss.
Yeah.
With the catch included, but also just a stat line, he went nuclear that night, single-handedly leading RB to a win. And that Garcia X connection is something we need to talk about, because that's what we need to see more of moving forward for this RB offense. Whenever it gets going, that's when they start winning these games. Whenever it's not there, whenever they kind of just restrict X to special teams, that's when they don't have as much luck in these games. Yeah,
for sure. It shows, because Garcia had his best game of the year so far, undoubtedly, throwing 15 for 23, 282 yards, 65.2 completion percentage, which is definitely one of the higher ones on the season we've seen, and 18.8 yards per throw, which actually from his last game goes up. It actually doubles his last total, which is a great thing to see, is the passing game improving.
And we have the stats on X's usage in the past games. Against Fenton, he had 5 receptions for 37 yards only. Against Elgin, he had a little bit better, had 1 reception for 61 yards, and that 1 reception was a touchdown. Against Hinsdale South, which was also a loss, that was only 5 receptions for 78 yards. And then in his worst game, where RB had nothing on offense, 2 receptions for 2 yards. So clearly he needs to be more involved if they want to have success. You can't just put him on kick returns. And it showed today he's definitely going to be getting more touches and targets coming up.
He's too dominant of a player to just have on kick return. Like, when you think of guys like kick return specialists like Devin Hester, you don't really hear much of them in the offense. But then there's guys like Cordero Patterson that you can compare X to, where Cordero Patterson can be listed as a wide receiver, running back, kick returner, anything you need him to be. That's what X needs to be in this offense. And it showed in the last game as he succeeded in all aspects of the game.
Yeah, and like you said, X might need some more touches as running back as well, because they may need some help there. They only had 29 yards on the ground. We saw Ratana have more volume than Renteria in this game. He had double the touches, but Renteria did have more efficiency. Ratana had 10 carries for 26 yards, which is 2.6 yards per carry only, while Renteria saw 5 carries for 17 yards, which is a little bit better, and that was 3.4 yards per carry. Worth noting, though, that Jaden Karras is lethal on the run, especially on that jet sweep where he had a 17-yard rush touchdown.
Yeah. Seems like we're kind of seeing this long run from Karras week to week. It's happening at least once a week. I like how we're fitting it into the offense, obviously not overusing it, as I believe he only had 2 rush attempts that game. But it's good to see us utilizing our receivers the right ways, while we could get X downfield, draw guys downfield, and get guys like Jaden Karras going in motion in the backfield. But something we're also seeing week to week is the poor 4th down conversion percentage ever since really the start of the season.
Yeah, and in these games where they've lost, even in GBS where they did win, they've been outgained. They've had a worse third down efficiency than the team they're playing.
Yeah.
For example, they went 4 for 12, which is 33% on third down, 0 for 1 on fourth down versus GBS. Did not get much better the game before versus Fenton, where they went 20% on third down, going 1 for 5. Still, again, 0% conversion on fourth down. Going to Elgin, they went 1 for 4, 25%, and once again, 0% conversion rate on fourth down. Against Hinsdale South, once again, 0 for 2 on fourth down, still 0%, still yet to convert on fourth down, and went a little bit better on third down, 4 for 11, 36%, but still not even above 50 in the games they've even won.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're held to 11 third downs in a game like they were against Hinsdale South, against a very beatable Hinsdale South team that we ended up losing to, it shows that's really the deciding factor of the game, is our offense struggling in the late down territory. It's really costing us these games, and I feel like we kind of got lucky that we were super strong in the start of our third quarter and the start of our first quarter against Glenbard South, or that game could have gone heavily downhill.
When you're given 11 third down opportunities, that's something you have to take advantage of. You can't let those chances go to waste. And we got lucky we won against Glenbard South when we had 12 third down opportunities, only converted 4 of them. So
Yeah.
That's something that needs to improve on that front.
Yeah, something that doesn't need to improve is our defense. Our defense continues to come up big. A pattern we keep seeing is the interception game improving. This time, 2 new faces in the club. We got Luke Ferguson with a big pick after a Myron Bia tip at the line. Luke Ferguson lays out, gives the Dogs beautiful field position, eventually converting for a touchdown. And then John Evans, late game, a ball is thrown up, kind of 50-50 ball. John Evans reads it like a dime, and there's no one near him but the ball, and it's game over.
It's good to see our Napoleon Dynamite getting an interception finally.
Yeah.
Been a frequent starter in this RB secondary for pretty much the whole year, so just see him finally getting that interception and that turnover, that's huge for him. That'll definitely help his confidence. Secondary has been a big issue for us in past games, but in this game, definitely did come a big for us. And Oscar Aguirre, safety, who not known to really garner a lot of tackles, he did get a lot in this game with 11. Warren Mason staying stellar once again. He's always been very consistent. He had 9 tackles, including a tackle for a loss.
Yeah, and you know, our guy Max Strong, we talk about him every week that we're on this show and every week that we have a game. He continues to be the most valuable player on this defense, recording 16 tackles and a tackle for loss. He comes up really big in a much-needed game from a linebacker like Max Strong, when their whole offense really revolved around their running back, Vontae Clark, who we really shut down after the second half.
Yeah, no, he's by far the MVP on defense this whole season. 16 tackles is insane, including a tackle for a loss. I mean, he's getting a little braggadocious about it, but I don't even blame him.
Yeah.
He needs to kind of have that killer instinct. He needs to have that confidence. You need to get egotistical out there, and that's what he's doing.
Yeah, and let's hope he can bring those up to our next 2 games this year, going against the 0-6 Elmwood Park, which should be an easy win for the Bulldogs. But again, we've talked about some games that should be easy wins in our opinion, and they've gone south. Although Elmwood Park has seriously struggled this year, getting blown out in every single one of their games, and it's not looking great for Elmwood Park.
We had the same aspirations about Ridgewood, hoping they'd win that, and that did not turn out in our favor. But we're hoping that this statement win against Glenbard South could be a momentum changer.
Yeah, for sure, because the Dogs need to win out if they want to make a nice playoff run and not line up against East St. Louis, which is the toughest matchup in the state.
Which it may be inevitable at this point, but
yeah,
still have to win out to even make playoffs. And then GBS will play the aforementioned Ridgewood coming up, who are 3-3 now. And so moving on now to Brother Rice versus Mount Carmel, probably the most hyped game of Week 6 of IHSA football, where Brother Rice shocks previously ranked number 3 ranked Mount Carmel in a 16-13 conference win.
Yeah, that is a massive win for Brother Rice. We've seen them posted on Sloshay throughout the year in these big games like they were against Marist, St. Rita, and Loyola, which all ended up being close losses for Brother Rice. And for them to be able to pull out a win against the top 3 Mount Carmel, although they were down Jake Elliott, it shows that Brother Rice could be a contender this year.
Yeah, and they lost their last 3 games, not including a throwaway 48-0 win against an easy St. Patrick team, but before that they lost 34-27 to Marist, 14-7 to St. Rita, and 28-21 against Loyola Academy. Granted, all great opponents, but still,
Yeah.
you need to get a win somehow. And finally, they got that against a Jack Elliott-less Mount Carmel team.
Yeah, and honestly, like we said, there's no excuses when it comes to losing 3 straight games. But this time, Mount Carmel's the one that needed the excuse. But a big guy that stepped up for Brother Rice, C.J. Gray. He threw for 192 yards and a touchdown, going 13 for 20 in the passing. And senior running back Tyler Lofton had a decent game, got the job done. 13 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. And some of the main receivers that we saw in the mix for C.J. Gray were Jimmy Maxon III. He had 3 catches, 79 yards and a touchdown. Daniel White had 2 catches, 43 yards. And those were really just the 2 top targets for C.J. Gray. And really helped them succeed against this hard Mount Carmel defense.
I can only imagine the Caravan would have put up more than 13 with Elliott at the helm.
Yeah.
But junior Emmett Dowling still did a decent job with this Mount Carmel offense. He had 168 yards and 2 touchdowns on 17 of 27 passing. Threw to Quentin Burrell a few times, who we talked about before. He's a great sophomore wide receiver that's still developing. He had 4 receptions, 58 yards, and 2 touchdowns himself. Cooper Lehman, a guy that broke records 2 weeks prior. He had 6 receptions for 45 yards only, so a little limited there, but still not a great offensive display. But I think Elliott will be back soon, at least in time for playoffs, from what I'm hearing from head coach Jordan Lynch. So I don't think it's a time to hit the panic button if I'm the Caravan. I think wait, take a deep breath, and I think you guys are going to be just fine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you lose a game to a pretty good Brother Rice team without your star quarterback in Jake Elliott. But one last stat I want to touch up on for Brother Rice, or for Mount Carmel, it really wasn't the passing game that struggled this time around against Brother Rice. It was their running game. On the ground, they were out-carried 102 yards to 19 yards.
Yeah, that's not going to win you any games.
No, it's not.
You need to run a game to open up. You need to run a game to play well so you can open up the passing game. And when that doesn't work out, you're not going to have any success.
Exactly. Like on the 2 touchdowns that were thrown to Quentin Burrell, those were both 2 deep ball touchdowns that you can't really repeat more than twice in a game where you are only getting 20 yards on the ground, because clearly they're going to know when you're trying to throw the ball, and it seemed to be very often.
Definitely an issue that Mount Carmel needs to work out soon, hopefully this week, because they have a pretty intriguing matchup coming up against a 4-2 Joliet Catholic team.
Yeah.
Definitely a force to be reckoned with there. And without Jack Elliott, I think, for another week, they might have some trouble.
I agree with you. Joliet Catholic is obviously not one of the top teams in the state, but they're known to be a heavy opponent, and they're not going to be an easy win, especially without a star player like your quarterback, the head of the offense. But let's go to Brother Rice now. Their next game is against Niles Notre Dame. This is obviously less of an opponent than Joliet Catholic, but this is a much-needed win for Brother Rice.
Yeah, and hopefully this will stir some momentum towards them, and they can pick up some steam here. Maybe got some easier games coming up in their schedule, such as Niles Notre Dame. Niles Notre Dame 2-4 in the season. Brother Rice now 3-3. Most likely go to 4-3 after a result this week. Now let's go to Nazareth. Nazareth versus St. Rita, and Nazareth is starting to prove that they are legitimate state contenders once again after a convincing 45-21 win versus formerly top 10 ranked St. Rita.
Yeah, Naz improves to 5-1. As we saw last year, they were a 6-4 team. People believe that they shouldn't have even made the playoffs, but now they're at almost the 6-win mark with 4 weeks left of football to play, which is great to see from Nazareth. And when we talk about their loss, it comes to Mount Carmel with Jake Elliott in what seemed to be a blowout loss, but they were still able to put up 33, a 56-33 loss. Nazareth is a scary team to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting accustomed to blowout wins at this point. They've won 3 games by a margin of 24 points or more, and the only blemish on their record has come from a 56-33 loss with a Mount Carmel team that did have Jack Elliott. And St. Rita, on the other hand, they dropped to 4-2 now, which is, all things considering, still a respectable record, considering they're also in arguably one of the toughest conferences in Illinois.
Yeah.
They had to play Naz, St. Francis, and ICCP, and they did beat Brother Rice. So, still respectable record considering all things there.
Yeah, and let's talk about more of the game now. Nazareth had a 28-point third quarter that really just kind of shut out the game. They had touchdowns from Jake Kestone, 72-yard pass from Logan Malachuk, who had a phenomenal game. Logan Malachuk under center. he was a force to be reckoned with. His deep ball was on point the entire game. But then Charles Calhoun on the run had a 9-yard run for a touchdown. And again, the deep ball, this time to Trenton Walker, a 50-yard pass from Malachuk. And then Dylan Wellner, a 47-yard pick six off of what seemed to be an underthrown slant ball. But once that ball, actually, I'll give him some credit. It was a little one-hand grab, too, from the linebacker. But once he had it in his hands, he was gone.
And after that, St. Rita had no chance of coming back. Score was 45-14 at that point.
Yep.
But, however, Mustangs, they did put up a valiant effort that night, led mainly by junior wide receiver Walter Jones, who had a night similar to X against Glenbard South. His stat line is crazy as well. He had 5 receptions for 128 yards, including a 54-yard long touchdown. That's 25.6 yards per reception. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, and when you put into perspective how much they leaned on Walter Jones, let's look at Steven Armbruster's stat line of the game. He went 10 for 16, 174 yards. That means 128 of those just came from Walter Jones alone, which shows how heavy he's relied on in that offense. He went 17.4 yards per pass, 62.5 completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions that obviously came up costly in one of them, resulting in a pick six with a 99.5 QBR.
And the stark difference between Nazareth and Mount Carmel this week was Naz's O-line and running game completely helping out the offense.
Yeah.
They opened up the passing game, let Logan Malachuk cook and do his thing. Tim Rackey, head coach for the Roadrunners, was very happy with this. And although it may not show on the stat sheet, the running backs and the O-line, they did very well in that game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously stuff that you don't really see on the stat sheet, like you said, but those are keys to the game. Those are big parts of the game that you can't really win without.
Yeah.
But now let's look at the upcoming matchups. Naz this week has De La Salle, a little private school in Chicago. They're not terrible at football, but this will be a pretty easy win for Naz.
Yeah, they're not great. They're going to keep rolling, I think, go to 6-1 on the season. And then St. Rita plays Leo away, another Chicago public school that I think they should be able to handle easily.
Yeah, let's talk about a team that's been taking down teams really easy this year, but finally had their first opponent where they still blew out, Downers Grove North. Yeah,
and a win against York, an away win. It was a home conference matchup. This was definitely one that was going to be an intense one from the start. They face a tough test versus LT next, but focusing on this game, they win 35-14, and it was probably their first notable win for the Trojans, considering that they had some Mickey Mouse opponents earlier in the season.
Yeah, when we look at their opponents from weeks 1 up until week 6, it's O'Fallon, they beat 42-0. Downers Grove South, they beat 42-0. Glenbard West, they beat 42-7. And then Proviso West, 54-0. Lastly, OPRF putting up the closest game of the year for them, 28-7.
Yeah, that's a 208-14 margin of victory. Numbers speak for themselves there.
Yeah, speaking of numbers, speaking for themselves, DGN's quarterback and Minnesota commit Owen Lansu at the helm went 13 for 24, 246 yards, 2 touchdowns, including an 18-yard pass touchdown with 26 seconds left to go in the half, putting the game to 21-7.
Both touchdowns for him came at the end of the second and third quarter, including a backbreaker of a throw, a 65-yard touchdown heave to Max Troha down the left sideline. Absolutely sucked the life out of that York home crowd. Absolutely chef's kiss, beautiful there. And what's actually insane about this play was that they did this on the fly.
Yeah, he went up to the line, and they actually had no play drawn up. We'll give you the quote from Lansu. He said, "They told us originally that we didn't need to run a play, and we could take it to the fourth quarter. Then they came back and said, we did need to run a play. And so they went up to the line, didn't have a play called. The guy went deep. We hit him, and we scored. Huge play for us." And that kind of sealed off the win.
This is classic middle school flag football where you're just the quarterback and you're just saying, hey, guys, get open. And it works.
Yeah.
I mean, at the highest, this shows why this guy deserves to be at the highest level. An FBS Power 4 quarterback committed to Minnesota because he can adapt to these situations on the fly and he can call an audible for his team and execute at a high level. It's insane.
Talking about a guy executing, let's talk about Jake Gregorio.
What a dog.
What a dog he was that last game. Ran for 3 touchdowns and played a pivotal role in the suffocating defensive effort for DGN, the leading tackler in their 7A runner-up season last year. He had 3 carries for 3 touchdowns on the night, which is an outrageous stat line that you see only from, dogs. And I'm blanking on the name of the kid from Fenwick.
Nate Marshall.
Nate Marshall.
Oh, yeah.
He's a guy you really see on both sides of the ball. He'll play some receiver. Like last year, we saw Nate Marshall, a game-sealing 50-50 fade ball was thrown up, and he called game on that. It's something that we're seeing from Jake Gregorio, and he's succeeding heavily.
Yeah, this kid's insane, and what's different about him and Marshall is that he's only 5'11", 190 pounds.
Yeah.
And he's still doing this at a remarkable level. And another player is Joe Edwards, sorry. He's another linebacker, and he had a forced fumble in this game. He's the younger brother of his offensive lineman, David Edwards, in the league right now. And he picked up his third D1 scholarship just hours before the game. He now has offers from Marshall, Akron, and Western Illinois. And from what I'm hearing, he is heavily under-recruited and should be looked at by some more FBS schools.
Yeah, obviously a kid who's trying to make a name for himself and is really succeeding, picking up offers pre-game and then going into the game and succeeding, forcing fumbles and getting his job done. But let's look at the upcoming matchups for these two teams. DGN their schedule does not get any easier as they face the 6-0 Lions Township.
I mean, it's the law of averages, right? After a easy first half of the season, they now got some tough opponents, such as 6-0 Lions Township. This game is going to be box office. DGN's home in this one. I think this is going to be the most covered game of Week 6 of IHSA, or Week 7 coming up, actually. And whatever happens, I think if Lions wins, they will be leapfrogged into the top 10 for sure. And if DGN wins, they'll maintain around the top 3 spot.
Yeah, for sure. This is a much-needed win for Lions if they want to, get seen by IHSA and get noticed into the top 10. But obviously, it's not like it's going to come easy whatsoever against the 6-0 powerhouse of DGN. But let's move on to the York side. They're 5-1 now, and they head to Glenbard West. They're 2-4 on the year, who's really struggled early season so far.
Yeah, and this game actually had a lot of historic background around it. Geneva Vikings are now 6-0, and they end a 13-game losing streak to the now 5-1 Batavia Bulldogs in a rivalry that dates back to 1912, ending over a decade of frustration for the Vikings. And again, it meant a lot to them. I mean, the seniors were interviewed afterwards, and they were just saying how happy they were to finally be the team that has beat them all their past 3 years of high school. It meant a lot to them, including senior wide receiver Talon Taylor. Yeah,
Talon Taylor, he's certified dog. Commit to Georgia, wide receiver. He was in double coverage all game, putting all eyes on him. Everyone's looking at him in the field, but they were still able to work around it as Anthony Chahino went 16 for 29, 153 yards, only 9.6 yards per pass, but he did throw 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 109.6 QBR. And let's hop in some guys that helped out Taylor, Finnegan Wepner. He had 4 receptions, 42 yards, 10.5 yards per reception, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, Batavia put an extra safety on Taylor early, allowing these wide receivers such as Wepner and Bennett Conkey to feast on one-on-one coverage, and it really opened up the game for Geneva. Wepner cooked, Conkey cooked, and then as well as Michael Ramura, who was their running back. 23 carries for 200 yards, 8.7 yards per carry, including a 48-yard long rush. Absolutely insane, taking some of that pressure off the back of Taylor. This offense shows that they don't necessarily need him to win games. They can look to some of their other stars, which is why they are extremely dangerous. Yeah, we talked about Taylor being in the double coverage most of the game. That really didn't stop the guy whatsoever. He still put up 8 receptions, 55 yards, and he did have a short long of 14, but he recorded a touchdown. And to be able to record a touchdown less than 14 yards in double coverage, that's not easy to do. Not at all. What is cool, though, is that Batavia's only score did come on a Philly special. Yeah. Got off to a 5-yard touchdown, too. Their quarterback, Bodie Anderson, so at least in a 30-7 loss, that's one cool thing you can come away with. Yeah, and, Batavia obviously looking to move on, so we'll talk about their next game against St. Charles East, the 2-4 squad. They do travel to St. Charles, which shouldn't really be that hard of a game for them. I think they'll bounce back, get a win here. But Geneva, they take on the 3-3 Wheaton North, and I just think they keep rolling. Me too. I think they're firing all cylinders right now, and there's no reason why they should be stopping. And now let's move on to our NFL Week 5 coverage, where we had some pretty big fantasy winners, including Jamar Chase. By far the biggest. He had 41.3 fantasy points, 10 receptions, 193 reception yards, 2 reception touchdowns, and 12 targets in this game, and where this Bengals offense is finally coming on, but they still lost nonetheless.
Yeah, this Bengals offense has been firing on all cylinders. They finally started to figure out their run game, splitting touches between Zach Moss and Chase Brown. And Joe Burrow has just been cooking in the quarterback position, leading the NFL in multiple stats. First in touchdowns with 12, first in passer rating with 113.6, 137 QBR just in that last game. He's tied for first in 40-yard-plus passes, or 40-plus yard passes, where he has 5. But they sit tied for the worst record in the NFL at 1-4.
And that's the other thing he cares about is getting those wins.
Yeah.
He can't do it all by himself. I mean, he's having breakout games now with Jamar Chase, with T. Higgins ever since week 3 against the Commanders. But their defense is one of the worst in the NFL, and it's not helping them at all. Ravens put up 41 points against them, and they're suffering because of it.
Yeah, they're suffering a lot. And when you think of their defense, a guy you think of is Trey Hendrickson, who's a guy who's been looking for a new contract, and they haven't found one yet. And he's really been threatening to leave the Bengals after this season. So if their defense can't pull anything together, I just think they keep going downhill from here.
If their pass running games has not showed why they need to sign that man, then I don't know what the front office is doing.
Yeah.
Because that's something that needs to be fixed right now.
Yeah. Something that does not need to be fixed, or could be fixed in the backfield, is Tank Bigsby. Back-to-back big games from this guy. He had 13 rush attempts for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns in the last game, with 1 reception going for 28 yards.
Yeah, he had 25.9 fantasy points, and he has completely emerged as the lead back in this Jacksonville backfield with Travis Etienne in their 37-34 win versus the Colts. He outsnapped Etienne and had double the carries, and he led them in rushing yards for the 2nd straight week.
Yeah, Tank Bigsby has always been a kind of guy that's been looked as one of the better backup running backs in the league. And honestly, sad story on my behalf is I had him earlier this year in fantasy, and I dropped him for a defense, and that's a big regret on my side. But he's definitely a guy that I could see coming in and taking the spot of Travis Etienne, who has actually erupted in a little bit of trade talks due to his struggles early season.
Yeah, Etienne started off as the lead back this season, but Bigsby, in the less carries that he was getting at the start, was more productive in those carries, and that's highlights the competitiveness of the NFL, is that if you're not doing well and you're starting to fall, someone else will come and take your spot, just like Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, for sure. And when you talk about the less carries, I want to say it was last week or the week prior, Tank Bigsby only given 9 carries, and he still outrushed Travis Etienne by a wide margin by putting up 80 yards on just 9 carries, which goes to show that Tank Bigsby will, without a doubt, have a big role in this offense.
Let's just hope that he doesn't continue to keep going off next week when they go to London to play the Bears.
Yeah,
he takes a week on us after we had a tougher performance against Chuba Hubbard in our last game, who also erupted against our defense. But now let's go to our 3rd fantasy winner, which is the entire Falcons offense besides Bijan Robinson. Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, and Drake London going off against the Buccaneers in an OT win.
Yeah, it's weird that you say the entire Falcons offense and then you leave out Bijan Robinson, who is the star in this offense. You know, guys like Mooney are just, wide receiver 2s from the Bears who are just signed because they need to fill a wide receiver group in Atlanta, and he's been having a heck of a season, for the Falcons. But then there's also guys like London finally stepping up. But let's talk about the man, the primetime man, Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Chains, 42 for 58. First of all, 58 pass attempts, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's outrageous.
I mean, I'd be a little upset if I was Bijan Robinson. That just shows that they do not trust you taking those runs. But 509 yards on those throws, 4 pass touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 114.8 QBR. The quarterback of the week, no doubt.
Undoubtedly the quarterback of the week. We talked about Joe Burrow a little bit earlier, but when you're putting up 500 yards, 4 pass touchdowns, actually breaking the Falcons franchise record for pass touchdown or pass yards in a game, and Atlanta has had some elite quarterbacks in their history. Guys like Mike Vick and the all-pro multiple times, Matt Ryan, the man known for just throwing it 40 times a game. To come in your 6th game and just break a franchise record, that's something special.
Yeah, obviously no one has thrown for 500 yards this season yet. I don't even think anyone has thrown for 400 yards or anywhere close to that. So the fact that Cousins did that against Tampa Bay, that's something special.
Yeah, we'll talk about something special. Darnell Mooney breaks out, gets 16 targets, leads the whole team in targets, 9 receptions, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Mooney had a great game, and it's not even his first great game of the year. This is something that we could kind of expect to be obviously not 105 yards per game, but around that margin.
Yeah, I think for sure he's going to be a flex play going forward in future weeks. Definitely starting in your fantasy rosters, unlike how I did not last week.
Yeah.
I suffered because of it. I left him on my bench, and he just absolutely cooked, while my wide receivers, such as Nico Collins, who got injured, did not. Unfortunate for me, but we move on.
Yeah.
Drake London, I think he will be a borderline wide receiver 1 going forward now, because he also had a monster game. 13 targets, 12 receptions for 154 reception yards, and a reception touchdown.
Yeah, definitely an experimental game for the Falcons to see like what would really work for them, and it's clear that the pass game has worked for them. Even guys like Ray McCloud were getting the work done. 9 targets, 12.6 fantasy points. This is actually not the first time we see this from McCloud, but I wouldn't doubt that we see it a little more often.
Yeah, I mean, this probably is a statistical anomaly a little bit, but
yeah,
there still are some patterns we can analyze going forward. This Falcons offense won't reach the same heights, but they'll be somewhere close to that maybe going forward in future weeks, especially against teams with a poor secondary.
Yeah. Now, move on to our fourth part of the NFL for the day is the handcuff running backs went booming last week. And let's start with Tyrone Tracy. The man, 18 rush attempts, 129 yards, a reception on 2 targets. He put up 14 fantasy points.
He may have just earned the starting spot over Devin Singletary. Going before this week, he was actually getting all the goal line touches already because he's a bigger guy than Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary getting more of that early yard line rushes, getting the early down work. But Tyrone Tracy, he just put up a heck of a game this week. And I think going forward, the Giants have a decision to make.
Yeah, definitely a decision to make as Tyrone Tracy in one game put up 130 yards, while Devin Singletary this entire season has put up 221 yards on 3.9 yards per carry, which is a pretty sad stat line coming from a starting running back in the league. But let's move on to our next backup running back that stepped up big time fantasy-wise. He put up 18.3 points. That's Trey Sermon, 10 rush attempts, 38 yards, and he had 6 receptions for 25 yards. Obviously a great fantasy performance, and obviously, realistically, not the greatest performance, only averaging 3.8 yards per carry, but got the job done for guys who needed him.
Yeah, good performance fantasy-wise, like you said. Unlike Tyrone Tracy's situation, I do not see him starting next week once Jonathan Taylor is back and healthy.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor is just too good to be left on the bench. But Trey Sermon, very serviceable effort for week 5.
So some guy that we could see starting next week is Kareem Hunt. 27 in rush attempts, 102 yards, and a rush touchdown with 15 reception yards on the day. He's clearly the running back 1 when Pacheco's out.
There were question marks about his volume going into this because Clyde Edwards-Helaire was up in the air about his status. Turns out he was suffering from a sickness, so he did not play. And I think going forward, they'll probably just keep sticking with Hunt after this monstrous game.
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been a guy who has formed lots of disappointment throughout his career. He was a first-round draft pick for the Chiefs, started off his career well, and just went downhill from there. But some guy who started off his career not so well, but is going uphill, is Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams and DJ Moore were electric in a revenge game for DJ Moore against the Panthers. Williams had 23.56 fantasy points, and DJ Moore had 27.50 points. Williams definitely got snubbed for Rookie of the Week, for sure.
Oh, without a doubt. I think, obviously, Jaden Daniels a great player. He had himself a great week, too. But, I mean, Caleb Williams had more pass yards, believe more pass touchdowns, and even close to more rush yards. So I don't really know what the bending point was, as they both played 2 1-4 teams, or 1-3 teams. So it's not like Jaden Daniels really outshined Caleb Williams. But without a doubt, I do think Caleb deserves it, and Jaden Daniels probably, deserves it a little bit. But like you said, DJ Moore, revenge game. I believe this isn't the first time he's played the Panthers, but every game's going to matter for him against the Panthers. 5 receptions, 105 reception yards, 2 reception touchdowns on 8 targets, putting up 27.5 points.
And I was actually at Soldier Field for this game, and this was just a completely different new-look Bears offense. Shane Waldron, I don't know what he's been doing ever since they came and talked to him about their frustrations, but they're just moving so much more faster. They're getting plays organized so much quicker. Williams just has so much more composure in the pocket, and this offense has really changed for the better. And like you said earlier, you made a great point. Everyone's clowning Williams. Oh, you just beat the 1-4 Carolina Panthers. Big deal. You're supposed to beat them. Well, Jaden Daniels, he just beat the 1-4 Cleveland Browns, who are not much better. And quite frankly, with Andy Dalton at the quarterback for Carolina, I probably would take them in a win versus Deshaun Watson's Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, two sad teams that were beat by two well-played rookies. I do think Caleb deserves more recognition than more hate, as he's really upped his game these past 4 or 5 weeks. But we'll talk about some honorable mentions for star players of the week. We had DeAndre Swift, another Bears guy that we love. He's been stepping up big time ever since that awful start that he had this year. And another guy who has been just starting to step up for the Dallas Cowboys, Rico Dowdle, finally getting his first 20-plus rush attempt game.
Fortunately for you, because you have him on your team. Yeah, he actually got involved in the passing game as well this game, something we didn't see earlier. He caught a decently long touchdown from Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
So he'll probably will be getting more involved in this game, especially with Brandon Cooks now on IR. Another guy, Ramondre Stevenson, lights out after being named the secondary running back to Antonio Gibson going into this game because of his fumbles in past weeks. He was not trusted at all by the New England Patriots staff, but after this game, I think he's regained the trust.
Yeah, he took that personally. Antonio Gibson was given the start. He also had a pretty good game himself. Not like Gibson played bad, so Ramondre went in. It's just when Ramondre went in, he took over, and he was lights out ever since he got that first touch. Another guy who's starting to take over is Brandon Ayuk. It has been a long-awaited breakout for Brandon Ayuk. He's spent so much time this year complaining about his contract. Finally gets a big contract and hasn't lived up to it, besides now.
Yeah, he's back from the dead after an abysmal start to the season. Jawan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, they were all outplaying him. And I was probably attributing it to his lack of practice time. There was disputes over his contract. Probably didn't get a lot of touches in practice, not a lot of rest for the team. This probably affected his play earlier in the season, but now, with some practice under his belt, he's come into his own finally, and hopefully we'll see more of this going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And let's wrap up the show here with our best teams of Week 5. Starting off with the last game of Week 5 is the Chiefs versus the Saints in a 23-16 win on Monday Night Football. Lots of people probably thought that game was pretty boring to watch because of how well the Chiefs managed that clock against a really strong offense so far in the Saints. They had the ball almost double the amount of time that the Saints did, holding it for 39 minutes and 56 seconds, while the Saints had it for 20 minutes and 4 seconds.
And what's scary is that this is still not the Chiefs team we are used to seeing.
Yeah.
They are still a ghost of themselves. They're 5-0, but they have been bad 5-0 wins, and that's scary to think how they're not even at their peak form yet. Patrick Mahomes not playing the way we expect him to play, not MVP status at all yet, but he's still finding a way to get these wins, which is why they're so good of a team. Even when they're not playing their best, they're still scrapping out victories here and there. And going forward, I don't see if there's anyone stopping them. Maybe the Vikings, but I don't know heading into the bye week.
Yeah, but we'll have to see. Both teams do head into a bye week, so they both have time to recover from long 5-0 starts of their season. But let's move on to our next team here. We already touched up on them a little bit. It's the Falcons. Big 36-30 win on Thursday Night Football against the Bucs, where I believed the Bucs were the overdogs to win this game, as Baker Mayfield has led the Bucs to plenty of great wins this year, but they were shut down by that offense.
Yeah, huge offensive performances from both teams, and I think this will continue. Buccaneers play the New Orleans Saints next week. New Orleans Saints started off. We called them the best offensive team in the league, maybe the best team in the league first 2 weeks. And after that, they've lost 3 straight. I think the Buccaneers should take that one. And then I think the Falcons will just keep rolling. They play the Carolina Panthers next. And you know how the Bears played, they're going to probably win.
Yeah, I think without a doubt both these teams, one recovers with a win and one keeps going with a win, because the Saints do remain without Derek Carr. They have Spencer Rattler, who will make his first NFL start. Looks like a rip-off Patrick Mahomes. Hopefully he can put up a Patrick Mahomes game, but that's what they'll need from him to be able to beat the Bucs. Our next game we talked about is the Bears. 36-10 win over the Panthers. Great overall win.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to from a Bears fan, which I am. Their next few stretch of games, they have to do well in. They play the Jaguars, and then they play the Commanders, the Cardinals, I think in the Patriots as well coming up.
Yeah.
So it's games that they need to win, considering that after that, it's a tough stretch of games. mostly all in conference, and then also playing the 49ers as well. So this is something that they need to win in. Coming up in 2 weeks, I believe. Jay Daniels versus Caleb Williams. That's going to be box office. That's going to be a game that everyone's going to be tuning in to watch.
Yeah, that'll probably be the game of the week when it comes. But talk about this past week, another game of the week we said was the Commanders with a big win against the Browns. Both, again, we talked about how the Bears and the Commanders both beat 1-4 teams, but these rookie quarterbacks are really showing lots of promise.
If you're an NFL bandwagon right now and you're trying to find a team to support, you're most likely going to be flocking to the Commanders. Jay Daniels is the most exciting quarterback to watch in the NFL right now. I believe if you look up the lines for MVP, I believe Jay Daniels is in first place. He's been absolutely phenomenal, and I am a little salty because we have Caleb, who's marginally maybe a little bit worse, and I'm hoping that he can perform up to the heights that Daniels has been performing at.
Yeah, for sure. A guy that deserves some recognition, who was brought in for the sole reason of drafting Caleb Williams, is Cliff Kingsbury, who has shown an offensive scheme like no other so far this year, putting up monster gains on the offensive side of the ball, helping Jaden Daniels succeed and throw more or less incompletions than touchdowns up until this last week.
And then lastly, the best 3-2 team in the NFL, the Baltimore Ravens, led by none other than Lamar Jackson, who is in back-to-back weeks now, beat Joe Burrow and Josh Allen 35-10 and then 41-38 in both crazy offensive performances. Baltimore Ravens are the real deal, and they're Super Bowl contenders for sure.
Without a doubt. Again, you talked about the best 3-2 team easily beating the best 1-4 team, somehow 1-4 team in the Bengals. I think the Ravens have proven that they're the real deal. Lamar Jackson proves that he's still able to throw the ball, not just hand it off. And with a guy like Derrick Henry, this offense is killer.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw that play where he mishandled the snap, still scrambled, beat 2 or 3 guys on the edge, and then just chucked it up to Isaiah Likely, who caught it. That was the play of the year so far.
Yeah.
And that's just the magic that Lamar Jackson can produce on a week-to-week basis, and I'm sure we'll see more of that coming up.
Yeah, without a doubt, we'll see more of that. Something that we're hoping to see more of is the bring back of Mark Andrews, who had his first productive game of the year. I believe he did put up 4 to 5 catches, which is a season high somehow for a big guy like Andrews.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And that will conclude this week of the Bulldog Blitz. Stay tuned in the next coming weeks for more future coverage and interviews. So long from the Dog Pound.